everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of String Ting on Silver Bullets podcast on the Ozone Radio Network. You're going to be able to find myself, WVABuckeye and CharlestBBC, every couple of few weeks talking Ohio State women's basketball. We're going to jump right into things because the last time we spoke to you that day, they had actually beat a pretty good Washington team at home. And we talked about, Charles, there were a lot of things that we had on the menu that these ladies should have accomplished over the next couple of weeks. And despite the loss to Duke, they really have played some excellent basketball in the 3 weeks since the last time we spoke.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's obviously the loss to Duke is disappointing. That was a real chance at a statement win, and a loss there certainly hurts us. I think we can talk a little more about the implications of that one, but we shouldn't dwell just on that. They did have some very nice wins. They won the Play for K showcase in Vegas with another win over a improving Stanford team that's going to be a very good team at the end of the season. And then most recently, they had a really dominant fourth quarter to beat a solid Florida team on the road.
Yeah, and if anybody has followed Florida's program and what they've been able to do, they do not lose at home. They are one of those kind of teams that has a ridiculous margin of victory against, I guess, what you could call Power 5 schools over the years. Very good program, big win. And, yeah, don't want to stick on the Duke loss very, very much. That's just one of those games like Louisville. They weren't shooting very well, but in hindsight being 2020, Charles, you know, this team, it's not about winning every game. It's about how they're going to grow so that they will be there in the Final Four when it comes to Columbus at the end of the season in the Women's March Madness.
Right, exactly. I think the big thing to keep your eye on this season is how the team is growing, how they're preparing for that NCAA tournament run. Now, that isn't to say that these games, you know, along the way aren't important to get wins in, because obviously that's going to matter when it comes to seeding and things like that, especially in the women's tournament where you still play home court advantage in the first 2 rounds, and you know, so getting that higher seed really matters a lot for that. So I think that's where the Duke loss is most troubling. In that, unfortunately, that will probably, you know, cost us a real shot at a number 1 seed this year.
I would have to agree with you, because I was thinking while I was following that 69-60 to loss to, at the time, number 14 Duke on the road. I was thinking this is probably the game of all games on the schedule that they needed to win on the road to secure home court advantage, if you will, that first couple of rounds, and then not leaving, you know, the Midwest or even Columbus except for the Elite Eight.
Right. Well, now I will say that, remember, it's the top 16 seeds still get home court for the first 2, and I think we're safe for that unless something obviously goes completely off the rails that. But, you know, looking at a 1 or 2 seed line just gets you that much better preference in the geography for the regions and where you're going to be for that Sweet 16 and Elite 8 game. And so that hurts us, and not as much just because not that the loss to Duke is bad. It's not a bad loss. They're a very good team. The bigger problem is that if you look at the Big Ten this season, there's not a whole lot of opportunity for real good quality wins there to push us back up. So we had to take advantage when we had the chance. And unfortunately, despite a great comeback in the second half there, they fell a little short.
Yeah, and good catch there on my mistake of how that would roll out. They do still have a pretty good opportunity of being a host team leading up to that area. Just a matter of not being able to say or play for the opportunity to stay home and be closer to home. Let's go back to the tournament out in Las Vegas. This theme, we talked about this the last time on String Ting. about this team is just to score in droves, and they just about averaged 100 points while out in Las Vegas. They really did go on a scoring tear while they were out there.
Right. And you can certainly make some arguments that Memphis and Florida Gulf Coast are not exactly powerhouses, but scoring 100 on anyone is an impressive feat and says a lot about this offense. And then to do that 2 days in a row and then come back on your third day and score 94 against Stanford says a lot about this team, and that they can get out there and they can run and they can do so day after day, which bodes really well come tournament time when you have to do that short turnaround, that little rest.
Yeah, so off the top of your mind, out of the because the 103-77 defeat of Florida Friday night was a pretty good, or Wednesday evening was a pretty good win for them. Your thoughts on the marquee win that they've had so far in this season? Is it seeing Stanford twice, or do you think the Florida win really is where they made their mark so far?
Well, so in terms of quality win, that when it comes to tournament selection committee, I think they're going to put Stanford higher up there because they are a better team. But I think going into Florida, winning like that on the road and winning the way they did, I think is actually far more impressive against Florida than Stanford, because it wasn't just an offensive effort. Obviously, 103 points, your offense is doing well. But the thing I found most notable about the stat line for that game was the fact that they forced 24 turnovers from Florida, and that is good defense.
That is very good defense, and it was strange that one of the discussions we had the last time about this team needing to step up defensively and getting some of that help from Harper, picking people's pockets. She really has stepped up her efforts, and incidentally, they've actually turned things around on the defensive end of the glass as well.
They've started making some improvements there. The rebounds still aren't quite where I'd like to see them, but yeah, at least on the defensive boards, they are definitely stepping up on that. The offensive boards we can still do a little bit better on, and that did kill us against Duke. Really, that we couldn't come down with the boards, but it is getting better. And as we've said, it's where this season ends very much that matters. And if we keep seeing that improvement, I'm going to feel much better about our chances in March.
I would too. I think this team has a little bit different of a feel early in the season in their non-conference play leading up to Big Ten play, which they don't start until they make a trip to Nebraska on December 28th. And I think the funny thing, while we're still talking about the schedule a little bit, is that they're going to play their arch rivals twice before they ever even get a chance to see Maryland, Iowa, and Michigan State, which they see in back-to-back games in January, which are going to be very crucial matchups.
Definitely. Well, and I have yet to figure out the Big Ten scheduling computer for basketball, men's or women's. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever how it does it. And it definitely did not do us any favors with that run at the end of January there with a home game against a Michigan team that is ranked and playing very well. A trip to Maryland, who is the other real top team in the conference this year, and then of course Michigan State always plays them tough. So really, in a 2-week span, we're going to mostly see the Big Ten kind of settled right there, I think.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt in that, and it's really boggles the mind, as you say, how the Big Ten computer spits out the schedule that you play an Indiana team really within 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, 13 days. Indiana is one of those teams I think that has an opportunity to be dangerous when we go over there in Bloomington on January 13th. But it sets them up for a 2-week run that just if they survive that 2-week run and hit the February stretch, I think they'll be in good shape. But if they don't survive that, they could be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, definitely. That is going to make the season. And yeah, as you mentioned, Indiana's mixed in there too, and they're a team that every year watching Big Ten basketball, they're always a bit better than the results turn out for them. They're a better team than where they finish in the Big Ten, and they're always dangerous because of that. So they're definitely not someone that we can sleep on in that run, really.
No, they're that one team in the conference, more than maybe Minnesota, that is the Jekyll Hyde team in the conference. They can look horrible on a Thursday night against the bottom dwellers and then turn around and upset an Ohio State or Michigan State on Sunday. They've truly had those kind of turnarounds in the past few years.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things, and it also just reminds you that you just can't take anyone in the Big Ten lightly. This conference has grown so much in women's basketball over the last 10 years, where we were maybe getting 3 or 4 teams into the tournament most years, and that's about it, to where we're getting 7 teams in. And so you really can't take anyone lightly. And so while we talk about that big end of January run as deciding the Big Ten in many ways, we can't sleep on the fact that there are other teams that are definitely dangerous in the conference. And in fact, really, if you look at everyone in the conference, even Wisconsin, who is traditionally awful, is still at the moment over 500.
Right. Yeah, I meant to go look up Minnesota as well to see if because they had been playing pretty good, have a good coach, have a good core of players that return, could wreak havoc later in the season in the Big Ten standings, and I'm one of those guys that follows a lot of college women's basketball, and even though Maryland has been there since coming to the Big Ten, I don't think the Big Ten has played the cards of being in the title hunt every year in and year out, because they have yet to prove that they're going to be there at the end of this year.
Right, yeah. We definitely haven't made that run to where people are looking at us to provide Final Four teams, but I think we're getting to the point where we are a conference that is respected for having a lot of depth in it.
Exactly.
So now now it comes down to the top teams taking that next step up, where we are like the ACC then, or the Big East, where people look at us and go, they're going to be contenders for the national title, and hopefully this will be the year that Ohio State can start putting their name up there for that.
I would agree with that. I think in spite of where the ranking is right now, and the way things have, fallen out with a couple of losses here during the non-conference schedule, I think they're still one of those teams that most people expect to be there at the end of the season. And they've had the kind of success over the last few weeks that kind of tells you they're playing more like a basketball team than we had than we had really expected. Kelsey Mitchell's still scoring at an unbelievable clip, and we'll talk about her 2 records that she set since the last time we spoke. But they've really tried to balance some things out. Stephanie Mavunga has been the leading scorer 1 game in the last few weeks, but it's been kind of nice to see. I'm with you. I think their offensive boards have definitely got to improve, but I think they've really turned the corner a little bit as far as being more of a team with the 6 or 7 players that are seeing the floor.
Right, I agree. I think at least from the starters, we're definitely seeing contributions really all around. We're getting 4 people scoring in double figures normally every night, sometimes all 5 starters. But that's becoming a regular thing for it. So that's good to see. And we're seeing the bench players at least coming in and playing solid minutes, if not contributing as much as we would like. Obviously, as you said, Kelsey is still, being herself and kind of dominating things. But yeah, we're seeing other starters stepping up and contributing and showing that they can be the person counted on at times. And I think the next thing now I'm looking for is, can we get someone coming off the bench the way Lene did last year? Sierra has done in the past at times. Can we see a person who comes up and be that sixth person for us this year? And Michaela is shown some signs very recently, not as much scoring, but that you can come in and at least make a difference on the boards, which is nice. But I'm still waiting for that sixth, or even better would be seventh, person to really, come in and show that they can be a game changer off the bench, a good change of pace person.
Yeah, buy some more time on the floor. It's interesting that you brought Michaela Waterman up, because she has been that person all along that I felt like could be the wild card. She could be the one that steps in when there's foul trouble, when we lose a Doss or we lose an Alexa Hart for foul trouble or something like that. And she has been playing a lot better of late and has been rebounding well and doing well on the defensive side of things. But you're right, she hasn't done anything major yet in the way of scoring.
Right. Well, and really no one off the benches, and a lot of that seems to be that they're not even taking shots for it. And I don't know if this is a thing of, well, we have these starters out on the floor with us still, they're shooting so well, let's just keep giving them the ball, or if it's a confidence issue or what, but we're just not even seeing a whole lot of shots. It's not that they're shooting poorly off the bench, it's they're not even taking them. I think so. Just looking, for example, at that Florida game, our most recent one here, the bench had 8 shots in that game out of 74 for the team, despite playing over 40 minutes combined from the bench.
Yeah, it's been kind of strange, because I really don't believe that it's the coaches are putting the players in and saying, like the middle school mentality, make sure little Susie keeps the ball or Kelsey keeps the ball and does all the scoring while you're in there. I fully believe that this coaching staff wants these bench players, the young ladies that come in 6, 7, and 8 to contribute and to score, because where they're averaging points per game, the expectation would have to be there for them to score when they go in the ball game.
Right, exactly. So I don't think it's the coaching staff. I suspect it may be just in the players' minds, though, that you have these really good scorers out on the court. I think the natural tendency, if you're an unselfish player, is that you get the ball to the hot hand. But I do think that they need to realize that, it's okay for you to take shots too. That only makes things better for everyone. Exactly.
So let's talk briefly about the top headline over the last 3 weeks. My reference to little Susie, our own little Susie, Kelsey Mitchell, is now the all-time career leader in threes made in the NCAA, and she passed Chantel Lavender for the career leader in points, and now has 2,840 points on the season. And a side note to that, it's kind of interesting that when she did it on the road, you could tell that there was some desire there for the coaches or the staff to try to do something for her in the game, and they just they had to wait until after the game, but it was all over Twitter when she did it.
Right, yeah, and I mean, it's obviously a huge honor at this and a big accomplishment. You're the NCAA career scoring leader, the NCAA career 3-point leader. The NCAA career scoring leader is certainly in the cards potentially later in the season, but you have 3 points. You have the 3-point record for the NCAA. You have OSU career scoring record. I mean, amazing accomplishments that also kind of came with okay, finally, we knew that was coming. I think anyone who watched her, about halfway through that freshman season went, yep, it's just a matter of when on these things for it.
Exactly.
I don't think there's been a question of if for a really long time with her for it. Not, but that just shows the overall level that she's played with for 4 years. This isn't, a 1 or 2 great year thing. This is a consistent level where we could all see this coming the whole time because it's always been this effort.
Exactly. And I think the neat thing about it is she set the new single season mark for freshman year and basically sent the message that I'm going to continue to do this. I'm going to try to put this, not that Kelsey Mitchell cares about how many points she scores. She knows she has to, and she can, and she is the star of this team. But the fact that she continues to do the things that she needs to do to help this team win and has gotten much better at dishing the ball and getting some other players involved to the tune of Lene Harper, one of your favorite players, actually scored her 1,000th point in the Florida game as well. So it was a big night for both players.
Right, exactly. And that another great accomplishment from Lene to do that. And she has just really been the big story this season is her consistent level of production here, where she is pretty much someone that you can expect to always be in double digits every night with a good chance of a double every night. And exactly. I think that has added a new dimension to this team that we didn't have last year. And I think it makes it even more dangerous.
It makes them more dangerous because she has been able to do not all of her scoring, but a lot of her scoring off of steals. She's been able to I meant to go look it up this afternoon. She's had at least 2 steals in all 11 games that they've played this season. And that in itself is remarkable when you consider the minutes she's putting in each game and the role that she's actually playing on this team now to try to support Kelsey Mitchell in the scoring area and get the ball to other players and help them out.
Oh, definitely. Well, and the thing always to keep in mind with that, I mean, 2 steals is great, but that the steal thing only counts ones where you actually come up with the ball. It doesn't actually really count all the turnovers you force from that. So exactly. while we say those numbers for her, that's great, but she's influencing all these other turnovers too, that unfortunately get lost in how we keep basketball stats.
Yeah, I have always complained because my middle child, my daughter, was a defensive player. She loved to play defense, and because of the rules of steal statistics, and nobody keeps how many times they deflect a pass and somebody else ends up with the ball. They don't keep that statistic in basketball. It would be interesting to just chart how many times Lene has had her hands in the passing lanes and has disrupted a pass that Kelsey's ended up with or Asia Doss has ended up with.
Right, exactly. And so, yeah, I would love to see those numbers, but yeah, unfortunately no one keeps them for it. So what an interesting thing that we were just talking about Kelsey's record-setting nights and also how she's gotten much better at assists and stuff. I was just doing some quick looking at stats, and she's in the 2 games heading into Florida, she was averaging 5 assists a night, including the loss to Duke, and she'd been doing that really consistently all season. Florida, however, was interesting, and I think that the record was in her mind a little bit for that because she only actually had 1 assist in that game.
Yeah, and she got that. She got the record early. It was
first quarter, I think.
Yeah, I just read that 2:57 left in the first quarter when she had the lay-in that put her ahead of Gentel Lavender. And what's really, you and I have talked about Coach Mitchell and his era in other avenues before, other venues, and it's interesting that when Gentel set the record, the scoring record, she was basically just catching and shooting. He had a couple of good guards during her time there that could get her the ball, and she'd put it up and in. But those teams never really got to a place to where other people were scoring enough that if they shut Gentel down, the teams really suffered. And Coach Foster suffered for that in come tournament time.
Right, yeah. For a long time, Ohio State has just been known as that team that has one or two star scorers. And we often would have two, but that was the thing. We only had two people who could be counted on to really generate their own scoring, and so it did make us fairly easy to defend. Yes, you have two really hard players to shut down, but if you can shut down one or the other, you're pretty much set because no one else was able to consistently step up, and that's, I think, a big difference this year is that yes, Kelsey is obviously the number one threat, but if you look night to night, it varies whether Lene or Stephanie or Sierra is the number two scorer, or Asia is also getting up there too. And we have four people who are consistently alternating who is scoring number two here, and that number two scorer is still almost getting 20 points a night, whoever it is.
Exactly, and that was the other thing. Do you think that this Florida game, the game on the road, they washed their mouths out with Maine, even though Maine hung tough and it ended up only being a 13-point win, still a little hungover from the Duke loss. Is this Florida win going to be the game for them that turns some things around? They had all five starters scored in double digits against Florida down there in Gainesville.
I think it certainly could. I think especially if you look at how that game really played out for that. We went into halftime with a very nice lead. Well, we opened the game with a great lead. We were up 31-18 at the end of the first quarter. We maintained that 13-point lead into halftime. It actually got it up to 15 points. Was up 17 points. So 55-38 early in that third quarter, and then Florida comes back and pulls within 6 points here. Midway through that third quarter. So suddenly you've gone from a 17-point game to a 6-point game on the road. Obviously, all the momentum's with your home team, and we turned it around and we completely shut Florida down for the rest of the third quarter. At that point, they had gotten it to 60-54, and then Florida scored 5 points the last 5 minutes of the third quarter. So to go where Florida's on this great run, scoring a lot of points in those first 5 minutes of the quarter, to really doing nothing that second half of the quarter, I think that third quarter there in that turnaround is going to be something that's going to spark something in this team, because they did it both offensively, obviously putting up some points in that time, but more importantly, they completely shut down the scoring of a hot team.
Yeah, and incidentally, you just mentioned it, Charles. They did put up one of the largest scoring quarters against Florida all season, up 76-59, headed into the fourth, and ended up putting 27 points up and held them to just 8 or 18 points in the fourth themselves. Was a great, probably what we would have liked to have seen happen against the Louisville when they went on their little run. But I've got a feeling about this Florida game that it's one of those things where, Coach McGuff and staff knew that they had to get inside of their heads and say, look, we can have this kind of a victory that will be better than Stanford. Forget about the Duke loss. Forget about winning the Las Vegas tournament. And let's get ready for the Big Ten that's coming up in a couple weeks.
Right, I agree. And every time I look at how a team does over the season, what I always look for is, can the team fight back? Can they take a punch, and can they come back and keep their composure, turn things around, and still pull off the win, both within a game and from game to game. And I think Florida represented, really kind of both of this. As you said, Maine was obviously the next game after Duke, but they still seem to be kind of hungover from that. But they turn things around. But then even within this game itself, where the last time you went on the road you lost, it's suddenly you don't have the momentum, things aren't going well for you, and they found a way to come back. And that's what you have to do to get to that next level, is that, you've taken a hard punch on the road. What are you going to do now?
Exactly. And incidentally, while we've been away, Coach McGuff got his 100th victory as a Buckeye, and this game for him had to be one of those games where you look at the marquee matchups that he's had since he's been in Columbus, and let's be honest here, he has really put this schedule on steroids versus who the Buckeyes were facing before he came to Columbus. He's challenging this team. There's been a season where they played every Final Four team from the year before. This has to be one of those kind of wins that he felt he needed to get. And it's got to be ranked up there among the 100 that he's gotten since being in Columbus.
No, I would agree. I think it's as I said, I think it's a win that's much, much better than it appears to be if you just look at the records of the teams involved. I think if you really look at that game, I think it is, going to be one of the signature wins on this season. And I do agree with you. I think McGuff has done a great job of really boosting the schedule. And we don't win all of those games, but that's okay because we're getting that experience. I think a person you could compare to on the men's side would be Michigan State and Tom Izzo's scheduling there. I mean, he always schedules amazingly tough for non-conference. He actually draws a lot of flack for that because it inevitably leads to losses to them. For them, and probably hurts their seeding in March. But we always see what they do in March in the end.
Yeah.
It's where you end up, and I think McGuff is on this same right track here. Of we're going to schedule hard, we're going to take some losses and some lumps in the process, but we're going to be ready for March. And when that tournament rolls around, we're not going to be surprised by anyone we see.
Yeah, and to the point about Tom Izzo, it's one of those things where. He knows in the back of his mind it really doesn't matter what happens with that kind of a matchup early in the season because you have time to fix things, time to get the confidence back into players. And we're not here to talk about men's basketball, but Coach Holtman appears to have some of the same mentality. It looks as though the Buckeye men's, not to get off topic, but it looks as though they're going to have some pretty good schedule opportunities coming up over the next few years. So I like to see that on the men's side as well.
Oh, I agree, definitely. And I think maybe an interesting topic of a future show would be how I think for a lot of programs, the men's and women's teams, you do actually see a lot of similarities between them, and in some ways they do seem to feed off each other. And I think that would be maybe something we can talk about in a couple of weeks, not only at OSU, but maybe elsewhere too, and how that kind of. I've always found that to be an interesting observation.
Yeah, it's been fun to follow some of the Michigan tweeters since the Buckeye men came back and beat them last week, down 19, because they're all ready to jump off the bridge. They don't think they're ever going to beat Ohio State in any sport ever again, and I've really, really been enjoying it here of late. So I hope they keep tweeting their misery out there.
Well, I think we'll have a good chance in January for the women's team to just add to that misery there.
I'm very much looking forward to it. So two other players to talk about, and you and I both enjoy Stephanie Mavunga and Alexa Hart. Stephanie Mavunga now has 1,000 rebounds for her career and 250 blocks. One of only a few players to ever have that combination of statistics in the scarlet and gray. And Alexa Hart has to be the, pardon the pun, she scored her 1,000th point since the last time we spoke. She's got to be the heart and soul of this team, and the way they hustle and they get up and down the floor. She just never stops playing the game. She's always on the move. No,
I agree. And you have great points on both. And I think the real notable thing with Alexa this year is, I mean, it's been a tough draw for her. I mean, she was the starter for her first 2 years in Columbus, was doing great. Mavunga comes in and pretty much takes the starting job away from her. We had some time where they both were starting, and now Hart is on the bench, and she's still out there playing the same way. She's not scoring as much as she used to, and it really would be nice to see her get back to the scoring touch, but she's still out there working. And that is a major credit to her, because I think a lot of players would go, I'm not the starter, I'm stuck on the bench. They kind of pout about it, and she isn't.
Yeah, she has definitely taken the opportunity to continue to work hard and be she's an important part of the makeup of this team, and does her job as is expected of her when she's in the ball game.
Right, definitely. And I fully expect that at some point this year we are going to have to turn to her on the bench and go, you're going to have to win us this game. And I think I think we are going to see at some point she is going to be the difference maker in some game this season. I don't know when, but I will not be surprised at all to see that happen.
Me either. Well, your thoughts on, as we actually get rolling, by the next time everybody hears from us, we'll be talking about a couple of conference games. Dartmouth shouldn't be too much of a problem coming up Friday, December 15th. Then they go on the road, incidentally, in a in-state matchup. Everybody knows Cincinnati cannot stand Ohio State, no matter what kind of teams you're talking about. And the Buckeyes, that'll actually be on ESPN2 at 4 p.m. That's going to be an important matchup before they start Big Ten play.
No, I definitely agree. It's your last. It's the last game before conference play. It's not the last non-conference game, because we have one of those random non-conference games sprinkled into the middle of the conference schedule because of the way the Big Ten schedule works. But yeah, it's another road game, and road games are always a good chance to make a statement for it. And it's going to be an important game for recruiting, because it's on ESPN2. It's national TV, which is always a good opportunity to make a statement about the program's future.
That's right. A great opportunity to take care of an in-state rival on national TV. They're, we talked the last time, they had a pretty good early signing period class. They're still working on the number one player in the country to try to come in next year. We'll have more information. We'll talk more about that at a later time as that comes about. As the Buckeyes start the conference slate December 28th in Nebraska, what is going to be your favorite game to follow up there as the Big Ten conference schedule starts rolling?
Well, so obviously the conference opener is always a big game. It's always a chance, to make that statement right off the bat of, hey, we're here to win this. But I think the game I'm most looking forward to, it's a tough one in the early conference season, between the January 4th game against Minnesota, just because of the problem we had with Minnesota last year and how and what that cost us at the end of the regular season. So it would be very nice to get some revenge there. At the same time, coming up on January 7th, we go to Ann Arbor to take on Michigan. It's a rivalry game. Always love beating them. It's always fun to beat them at their place in that awful dark pit of a stadium. I hate Michigan in general, but Chrysler Arena really is an awful stadium.
I dislike it as much as that thing the Hoosiers play in Bloomington. It's I've never enjoyed either of those places or watching games on those places, and hopefully someday in the future they'll tear them down and build something a little bit nicer. But yeah, well, I'm with you there.
Well, Indiana at least has some history. Chrysler used to have history, but that's kind of in a box in the back corner now. But they don't even seem to be able to afford lights at Chrysler, much less anything else. Right. But more importantly, rivalry game, and Michigan looks like they're going to be still be a top 25 team at that time. So that is going to be not only a statement game for the Big Ten, but a chance to make a statement of, yeah, look, we are a contender out there.
Well, I'm going to agree with you, Charles. It's one of those things where, we started off the conversation this week about the tough stretch in January with Michigan, Maryland, Iowa, Michigan State. But truth be told, I'm looking forward to the early season stretch because I think that they have to be able to play. First, they have to be able to play well on the road in Lincoln. They've got a bullseye on their back in the conference. Everybody wants to knock them off, so they're going to get everybody's best. And then when Indiana comes to town on New Year's Eve, that also is going to be one of those games where they're going to have to be up to the task because Indiana, like I said, is that team in the conference right now that you can either beat them by 30 or they're going to upset you.
Right, totally agree on there. I think it's going to be a really great start to the conference season, and yeah, I really look forward to it. And then the other nice thing is Big Ten ball. We actually start getting more of these games on TV, which has been disappointing with the schedule so far. As we've had an ESPNU, we've had a Big Ten Network game, and the Duke game was ESPN2, but it's been hard to see this team so far this year, which is a tragedy. But that turns around in the next couple of weeks. We have 3 games on ESPN2. We have 3 games, or not more than that actually, 4 games the next month on ESPN2, another 3 on Big Ten. So we can actually see this team finally.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing some of those matchups that are coming straight to you. And we're going to be here again in just a couple weeks after the holidays to talk more about Ohio State women's basketball. Charles, do you have anything else you want to add this week?
No, I think we've kind of covered it. I think at this point, 2 more games to get through, a little bit of a holiday break, and then hopefully we see them come back real strong for those end of the month games to start off the conference season. And I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Me too. And just a reminder to our listeners that we are planning to have assistant coach Patrick Klein on our next edition, and hopefully Coach Klein will be able to give us a pretty good preview of that tough Big Ten schedule that we've been talking about tonight. For CharlesBBC, I am WVABuckeye. We thank you for listening to episode 2 of String Ting on the Silver Bullets podcast on the Ozone Radio Network.